Hi everyone, I'm Jayne at Rockin' Worms. I hope you're having a good evening. What I'm going to talk to you tonight about is one of my now grow out bins that has worms in it from all life or age stages. And I want to talk to you about how that happens. Okay, so let's just get right into the bin. This bin is from mid-February, about February 13th. And it started off as a cocoon bin when I pulled the breeders out of it on, mid-February. And the cocoons went into this bin. Let me get this out of the way. You know what? Let me say this. See how the paper's all eaten? This is just a sign that the worms are probably getting a little hungry because they're coming up and eating a lot of the newspaper. So I'm going to make sure I replace the newspaper at the end here. Put that out of the way. Okay, so like I said, this bin is from the middle of February. It started off with cocoons in it, and that's all I had in it besides a handful of babysitter or nanny worms to help the cocoons hatch and decide that it's a good time, come on out and join the world. So what I'm going to do is go through this bin and see what the worms are looking like now that they're approximately 3.5 months old. So I am hoping to see some adult worms, and I probably see some baby worms, and we may still even see some cocoons in here. And let me talk about why that could possibly be the situation that I have worms of all ages in here, even though they all started out at the same time as cocoons. Well, that's actually the answer. They didn't start off all at the same time, even though they all started out as cocoons. Let me show you a couple of these. This looks like, here we go. So here is a adult breeder age red wiggler worm. You can see this is the head that's kind of spinning around saying, hey, what's going on? This is the bulgy clitellum. The bulgy is one of the characteristics of a red wiggler. The clitellum being fully formed like this is a sign of sexual maturity. So this particular worm is ready to rock and roll and make some cocoons. And then we follow down its body. And you can see at the end some of the yellow tail. This one isn't as extensively yellow as some of them, but you can see that yellow tip. So here is a fully formed adult. Let's see what this guy is. Let's see what this guy is. Yep, there's his clitellum. Not as bulgy, but it's still there. And he's got the little colored tail. So this one isn't quite as adultish, if you will, but awfully close if it's not fully sexual mature at this moment. Now I also wanted to pull out a couple of these guys. Here is obviously a much younger worm. Now what I was saying is all these cocoons went in at the same time, but the cocoons aren't really all the same age. Let me pull out a couple other ones. That's because when you set up a breeder bin, you set it up on day 1, and you pull the breeders out on day 21, give or take, a couple days either way. And what happens is those breeder worms start making cocoons right away. So you're going to have some cocoons at the 21-day mark being 21 days old, or 18 days old, or 15 days old. But you're also going to have, let me put these guys back, and continue to dig through and see what we have. Here's another adult. Okay. But what you're also going to have on day 21, when you reset your breeder bin, you're going to have cocoons that were laid yesterday, or that morning, or, oh, here's a youngster, or last week. So even though all the cocoons go into a cocoon bin at the same time, the actual age and therefore the readiness to hatch of the cocoons varies from being 21 days old and getting ready to hatch right away. Here's some younger ones, up into ones that were just laid and have, you know, time for the eggs to develop into worms. Okay, and further, in addition, not all cocoons hatch at 21 or 27 days. There's a little confusion on the internet on what the actual length of time it takes for for a cocoon's eggs to mature and be ready to hatch. But even if it's 21 or 27, it doesn't make a difference. The point is, worm cocoons hatch when they're good darn and ready to hatch. When those little baby wisps in there feel that the external environment is favorable for them to survive. So, for example, in a bin this size, which is approximately 2.5 square feet of surface area, you have worms that are, you know, next to perhaps a pocket of food, and they sense that and they come out. Then you could have cocoons next to a pocket of soil or bedding that is not near food, or perhaps not as moist as other sections of your bin. And so the cocoons in that area may decide, hey, it's not quite as favorable as I want it to be. I'm gonna hang out in my nice little safe cocoon and wait for a better condition to happen, and then I'll hatch. Okay, so if you follow that, the summary is all your cocoons can go into a bin at the same time, but they're gonna hatch at different rates, okay? Some will hatch very quickly, some will take much longer to hatch. I'm trying to see, this here is bedding. I did a feed on, let me see, on the 19th. So that's like 12 days ago. And I put in vegetables, but I put them on a bed of just dry cardboard micro shred. Okay, so it was micro shred, the vegetables, I put on worm chow, I put on some amendments, eggshell, dolomite, lime, some azomite, and then I put a bunch more dry cardboard shred on top of it and covered it up, and now I'm coming back in, like I said, 12 days later. The purpose of the dry shred is to, one, act as carbon to offset the nitrogen that is being added to the bin with the addition of the vegetable food, and also to help absorb the moisture that the defrosting and decomposing vegetables give off. So instead of having it all go down and sit as a soppy bottom, which could turn into an anaerobic situation in your bin, the addition of the dry carbon is meant to mitigate that situation, you know, by absorbing moisture, offsetting nitrogen, and, you know, eventually giving the worms food to eat. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I actually like this method of adding dry carbon into my worm bins directly, because you can see that it, you know, it takes time to break down. Now, it's only been 12 days, which isn't a huge amount of time, but at the same time, you can see how the rest of this bedding has been turned into castings and is really ready to be sifted. except I've got these, chunks of cardboard, shred in here, which, doesn't mean I can't sift it, but, doesn't make it as joyful to sift as if the carbon shred wasn't here. So I've got an idea on how I want to handle that situation, which I'll get to in a minute. Now let's just dig through the rest of the bin. I didn't get over into this corner over here to see what's going on. God, look at these, look at this. Those are beautiful castings. Oh, look at this tiny little worm. See the little worm right there? This is an example of what I'm saying, that even though these worms, cocoons, have been in here for over 3.5 months, plus the some of them up to the additional 21 days that they were in the breeder bin. Some of these little guys are just coming out to join the party now. Okay, so, all right, everything's looking really good. All right, so what am I gonna do now? See, again, look at all this cardboard. All right, so what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna give these guys a feeding because they're down to the shred, and they're also in a heavy castings area. So they may not have a whole lot of food. So what I'm gonna do is 2 things at once, or at least 2 things at once. I'm gonna do what's called a trench feeding. So I'm making a little trench. That's pretty self-explanatory. And I'm making it at one end of the bin because what I'm going to do is start a horizontal migration at the same time. So the worms in the other parts of the bin can start moving into this area, leaving the castings behind, which I can then, dry down and sift some more. So for food, I have, let's see, let me move this down a little bit. I have some previously frozen pumpkin. There's celery in here. I think I also have, I have something else. Oh, I think carrots. I thought I put carrots in. I think I forgot to put the carrots in. All right, so it's pumpkin and celery. They'll love it. Okay, so since I don't like the cardboard shred, but I still want absorption and of liquid and offsetting of nitrogen, what I'm putting in instead of the cardboard shred is some of my indoor tabletop pre-compost bedding. And it's, here we go. You can see here, this is just my working bowl. It's moist, so it's keeping the microbes alive, but it's also, toward the dry side. So I'm thinking it will absorb the moisture given off by the vegetables just fine. So it'll do the job of the cardboard shred, but be more accessible to the worms for direct eating and faster processing, which is what I want to see them do. This is my worm chow. Just a little sprinkle here, get them going. I'm gonna put in a little Dolomite lime. I'm out of eggshells. So the lime does act as a grit as well as a pH buffer. So double duty there. And a little azomite, which is a garden additive, all sorts of minerals in there to help your plants, and putting it in with your worms will allow the worms to start breaking down the azomite. So when it eventually goes through the worms and becomes castings, part of the castings, and you put them into your garden or your potted plants, that beneficial minerals in the azomite will become more readily plant available as well. Okay. I actually was going to put on a little bit more of the pre-compost bedding, but I forgot, and that's fine. Okay. All right, so let me give them their new newspaper after I put these little scraps on that were in there to begin with. Here we go. And I'm not going to spray this up, okay? I was thinking about giving a little spritz of water, but I'm not going to do that because this bin is getting, you know, ready to be sifted. And what I don't want to do is add in more moisture than I have to. And I'm squeezing this very gently because there's a lot of worms in there, but you can see how the bedding is holding together fairly well. So there's still a lot of moisture in here. So I don't want to add more moisture. I want the bin to start drying down a little bit more so sifting will be easier to do when I get to it. Okay, so this bin is fed, checked, and ready to have the horizontal migration go into that trough feeding. So the one end area will start to vacate of worms, and I can start sifting that. Now, of course, when I check in on this in another week or so, I'll be able to decide whether or not it's time to peel the cover back and let the castings that have been vacated by the worms dry down even more. All right, so that's done with this bin. The last thing I'm going to do with this bin, which I won't you know, waste your time showing, is I'm going to put some notes on the end. I've started putting more notes on my bins than I used to, and that's because, quite frankly, I can't remember what I'm doing in every bin anymore. It's a combination of having, you know, quite a few bins now, but also just having a lot going on in my life, and I just can't remember. So I'm going to put notes on here that there's adult red wigglers in here. So when I'm ready to, you know, pull out adults to start breeder bins, I know that there's adults in here already I can go in and pull out. I'm going to say that it's ready to be sifted and that I've started the horizontal migration. Okay, so do yourself a favor, make notes, make your life a little bit easier. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I'm always interested in hearing your comments and seeing and learning how you're doing things. And otherwise, I hope you're having a good evening, and I am yours in the dirt, Jayne.